Good afternoon, folks. Thanks for taking the time to join the webinar. So, hi again. My name is Durga. I started at Freshdesk as a product consultant, which means that I'd spend time talking to support folks like you, help you onboard and implement Freshdesk. I also have with me the person that built the automations in Freshdesk.
Hey folks, I'm Chara. I also started out as a sales engineer, which means I've done a lot of demos for customers like you. And after having implemented Freshdesk at different scales, I've now switched to the product management team, and I'm excited to talk about automations and what they can do for you.
Brilliant. So the agenda for today The agenda for the next 1 hour, for those of you that are new to Freshdesk and new to automations, I'm going to be giving you a brief introduction to the rules and some examples on how a lot of Freshdesk customers have set them up. We'll then give you a demo of what's new with the new automations and talk about the new workflows that you can automate. Towards the end, as a bonus, I'm going to be sharing a simple cheat sheet with you. So once this webinar is over and you go back to your desks, you have something handy that you can refer to in order to set up rules and make better use of the automations in your Freshdesk. Towards the end, we'll be sharing a few examples of the rules that the Freshworks support team have set up, and we'll be answering your questions live. So we'll start with an introduction to automations. So the way it works, the automations work in Freshdesk is as soon as a customer writes to you, starting from that to the work that your team needs to get done in order to help the customer, until that issue is completely resolved, automations work through the entire ticket life cycle, right? So what it does is make sure that nothing slips through the cracks, and you can just make sure that you can ensure every customer inquiry is being taken care of by someone. Now, in a sense, the rules run on three different scenarios. One is when a ticket is first created. So I'd like to take a real world example to compare these rules with. So when you call 911, someone called the dispatcher picks up the phone, figures out whether the person calling needs an ambulance or whether they need the police, and try to figure out how urgent the issue is, and then they take the next steps. Right, so that's how these rules work as well. As soon as someone writes to you, that very same instant, these rules will check for certain conditions and perform actions. So if you see the GIF on my screen over here, this is the rules that run on ticket creation and action. You can have rules set up such that when someone writes to you with certain keywords, you can have the priority bumped up. You can have it assigned to a different group. It can scan who is writing to you, where the question is coming from, whether it's social media, email, etc. So these are some of the common use cases that people that use Freshdesk have set up. One is prioritized based on the content of what the customer has written to you about. So if they've used words like urgent, extremely important, or exclamation marks, you can have Freshdesk automatically have the priority bumped up. So your team looks at those tickets first. You can categorize it based on the email that your customers are writing to you. If you have different email addresses for your support team. And the last one is depending on what they're written to you about, depending on who's writing to you, you can skip the autoresponder emails, or you can personalize them. As an example, if you have product A, you can have an entirely different welcome, thank you for getting in touch with the support team at product A. Whereas for product B, you can have an entirely different autoresponder email. So the next type is rules that run on ticket updates. Now, these rules are constantly on the lookout for any update that happens to your that's happening in your tickets, right? And based on that, you can have actions defined. So the most common example is how these rules reopen tickets. So if your team responds to a customer and says awaiting on customer, and if their customer responds to you, these rules can open them back up. So it's back on your team's inbox. Now, some of the common workflows that a lot of customers have automated is reopening tickets, the example that I just spoke to you about. And another common one, especially in the last few years, is flagging email failures. Now, sometimes when you reply to your customer's email, it might be that it's not reached their inbox for a couple of reasons. These rules can check for that and notify you and reopen the ticket. So you can follow up again with them or call the customer so you make sure that they've gotten the help they need. Another one you can do is follow up with unhappy customers. So if you have Freshdesk customer satisfaction survey set up, and if your customers send you a happy rating, you can have an automatic email saying, hey, thanks a lot, that means a lot. But if they've given you a sad rating, you can have these rules, reopen the ticket, notify your supervisor so you can follow up with them again, and turn that unhappy customer into a happy customer. And because these rules check for every update that's made to a ticket, you can track if agents are changing property and flag it or add a tag. As an example, we have one of our customers have created a rule where if agents are bumping down the priority from high to low, a note is sent to them saying, hey, just be sure not to change the priority, and the supervisor is notified as well. Now, the last one are rules that run on time triggers. Now, these rules scan your tickets every 1 hour and check if there's anything that needs an update. So these are the rules that will be getting rid of your to-do lists, so that they take care of reminding different people in your team. They can take care of reminding people that you need help from. So as an example, if you have a ticket and you need the inputs of a different team and it's been pending on them for over a day or two, you can have an email shot out to them automatically saying, hey, we need help from you in ticket number 12. Can you please have a look and let us know? Another workflow that, in fact, we at Freshworks automate is auto closing inactive tickets. So sometimes when we write to you folks, when you write to us, we get back to you saying, hey, hope this helps. And we may not hear back from you. Now, we first send an automatic email saying, hey, have you received our email? But after a while, if it's been inactive for over a week or two, we close them. Another thing you can do is flag pending tickets. So this way you can make sure that nothing slips through the cracks. Something else that doesn't strictly fall under the automations module in your admin settings, but is definitely worth a mention, is automatic ticket assignment. Now, although you can assign tickets using rules that run on ticket creation, that works best if you have a team of 2 or 3. If you have more than 2 or 3 people, then automatic ticket assignment is the best way to make sure tickets are assigned to the right people. So all you'll have to do, there are a couple of ways to do this. We have different round robin, which distributes all tickets evenly across your team. And then there's load balance that takes into consideration the workload that each person in your team has. So as an example, if Amy in your team already has a lot of tickets on her plate, 10 tickets on her plate, and someone else in your team has relatively less number of tickets, load balance would assign it to the person who is relatively free. You can also assign based on skill. As an example, if you have customers that speak a certain language, French or Italian, those tickets would go to the agents that are skilled at speaking that language. The last one, if you use Freshchat or Freshcaller and your team helps customers across different channels, OmniRoute takes into consideration their load. Now, the best thing about automatic ticket assignment is it first assigns the ticket to the right people, and because you can create inbox views for different people in your team, all they'll have to do is come into work, open their inbox, and they'll have the list of tickets that they need to work on at the ready. Cool. So that's about the introduction to automations. We now talk about what's new with the new automations.
All right. So now that you've heard what all has changed, or rather what all automations are capable of, let's take a quick look at the actual product. So, folks who've been around with us for a while, I'm sure you'd have noticed that our old automations had different names. We used to refer to them as dispatchers, observers, and supervisors. And well, we're still quite fond of those names, and while they work quite well, we want to improve the automations experience for teams of all sizes. And so we clubbed all three modules into a single automations module. And the idea behind that was to make the usage of automations as natural as possible. And by that, what I mean is, when you think of of a workflow that you'd want to implement in your help desk, I'm sure you're thinking, hey, I want to automate this process where whenever a ticket's created, I want that ticket to go to this group based on these properties, right? So you're pretty much just creating an automation rule that runs when a ticket is created, or when a ticket is updated, or based on a time trigger. So we want to go with that flow. And so we've combined rules that run on ticket creation, time triggers, and ticket updates all under a single automations module. Now, apart from that, we've also made a lot of aesthetic changes and included as much information as possible to make sure that managing automations becomes really, really easy, right? For instance, you get to see who modified or created your automation rules, when those changes were made, and the most useful one that we've heard from customers is the impact that the automation rule has had in the last 7 days, right? Um, so we've seen that this helps a lot of teams ensure that the automation rules that they've configured is actually effective and doesn't go stale. And even when they do, that they're able to immediately probably rejig their set of rules and make sure that their agents do as little work as possible when it comes to the mundane tasks, right? Now, with all your complex workflows and all the different types of customers you're supporting, I'm sure that you'd have quite a lot of sophisticated workflows. So if it's a simple setup, you could go on ahead and ensure that you just set up a bunch of rules where you need a ticket to be actioned upon based on the first matching condition that the ticket satisfies. But you'll always have those really sophisticated workflows where you'll want to run your ticket through an if else loop pretty much, and make sure that it traverses through a cascading set of conditions and apply a bunch of actions on them to get the latest and greatest information in, and to make sure that the agents have all the details they need. So depending on what type of setup you need, you could go on and choose whether tickets get the first matching rule applied on them and the rest ignored, or whether you'd want every single rule that matches those conditions applied for your tickets, um, to make sure that it's most effective. Now that said, you could go on ahead and have quite a few rules based on the size of your team, the number of customers, and how efficiently you're operating a help desk. So to make sure that it's always easy for you to navigate through all your automation rules, we've also built a simple search which works on the names of your automation rules. Oops. So you can go on ahead and ensure that uh, your agents, or rather your administrators, have an easy time figuring out which rule to modify and are able to pick it up quite easily. All right. So those are some of the changes we've made to our automations module. Now we're going to quickly go back and take a look at the specific changes, or other specific enhancements that we made that can make your workflows much more powerful. And I'll pass it back on to Durga to take you through that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jara. So right now, I'm going to be going into the details of the new features that we've added. Now, the first thing that you would have noticed if you've tried setting up a rule in your Freshdesk is the multi-level logical operators. So earlier we didn't, we've introduced now the flexibility for you to toggle between and or rules. And you have a number of combinations that you can create, right? And if you've been using Freshdesk for a while now, and if you've set up more than one rule to achieve a single action, what you'll find is that now with these logical operators, you'd be able to combine the rules into just one. So with one simple, straightforward rule, you can automate a complex workflow. The next, this has been our favorite, and we've heard from you folks as well, is the thank you detector. It's powered by our AI engine, Freddy. Now, what Freddy can do is whenever your customer responds to your ticket, it can detect whether it's a simple thank you, if it's an out of office email, if someone's just saying, hey, brilliant, or if they're writing to you with a question. Now, what Thank You Detector does, this automation does, is if it's just a grateful response, it does not reopen the ticket. This way, your reporting metrics don't get skewed, and there's no open ticket on an agent's inbox they don't need to work on. I'm going to, in fact, you can test Freddy out over here. If you head to thankyou.freddyproject.com, what you can do is type out examples of responses that your customers can send. So I'm going to say, brilliant, that works. So although it's not a straightforward thank you, Freddy with its AI engine can detect whether this is something that needs to be reopened or not. There you go. Freddy is 99% confident that the ticket can continue to be closed. This means that the agent doesn't need to have a look at the ticket. Let's test a customer. There you go. Freddy is confident that your customer may need some help. And the thumbs up and the thumbs down, that's how Freddy learns based on your inputs. So you can go to thankyou.freddyproject.com and test it out. Brilliant. Now, before I talk about the next set of new automation rules, I'd like to give you some context on what it's about. So custom statuses in your Freshdesk are the best way to keep track of tickets that are pending for different reasons. As an example, if you're a part of a product company, it might be that sometimes you need bugs to get fixed before you can resolve your customer's issue. If you're in e-commerce or if you're in services, some of your customers' issues might be about invoices, about billing issues. And in those cases, you need to wait for the issue to be fixed, get help from a different team before you can resolve the issue. And that's where custom statuses come in. Based on the kind of workflow that your team has, you can create your unique statuses. Right. So now how this helps is for an agent, every time they're working on a ticket, they'll know exactly, they can mark exactly why the ticket is pending. And you can, with your ticket views, you can always easily access the list of tickets that are pending for different reasons. And if you're a manager on an everyday basis, you'd know where your tickets are stuck. And you can pull out historic reports as well. That'll give you insights on what is causing delays in your customer issues being resolved. It might be that your team is extremely prompt in responding to your customers. The teams that are dependent on are fast in responding to you. But it might be something else in the life cycle that's taking a long time that's causing the resolution time to increase. Right, so that's about custom statuses. Now with automations, what you can do is trigger actions based on whether a ticket's been on a custom status for a while. So I'll give you some real examples, right? So if you reply to your customer saying, hey, I'd love to help you, but I need a little more information. Can you just help me out with A, B, and C? Right? And your customer forgets to get back to you. Now, in its typical case, what agents would have to do is every once in a while comb through their pending tickets and send out responses, or create a to-do list, or have sticky notes on their desk. Now, with these time triggers, it gets rid of all of that work. They automatically follow up with customers saying, hey, it looks like you needed help from us. Do you still need help? Please respond to this email. If you need help from a different team, what you're seeing on my screen over here is if you have a custom status where you say, hey, I'm dependent on another team, and you're waiting on them for inputs, you can have an email sent to a different team entirely reminding them. And if they take time in replying to you, if there are delays, you can tag those tickets. So at the end of the month, when you have a meeting with the folks that you need help from, it could be the billing team, it could be the developers, you have a handy list of tickets that they responded to late. The next one is another new condition we've added is checking if an update is made during your business hours, 9 to 5, or outside your business hours. Now, it helps. Something you can do with this role, best practice, is to keep your customers notified about how long it's likely for you to take to respond to them. So, if a customer writes to you over the weekend, you can have an automatic email sent to them. Dear customer, thank you for writing to us. Because it's the weekend, it might take us a day or two to get back to you. Hope that's okay. So, you're setting the right expectation with them. Something else we've often heard from you is best practices on sending people in your team notification about tickets. Now, what can happen if you set up a notification for every update is that your agents can get their email inbox can get clogged with a lot of emails, and it gets easy to miss out on an important update. Now, with this rule, what you can do is if there's a high priority ticket that's gotten an update outside business hours, you can have only them send as notifications to your team, and you can have the subject change saying, "Hey, this is an urgent ticket. Please have a look." So it grabs their attention immediately. Another new action we've added is the ability to add private notes. So what you can do is this specific example where you can use this automation is where you have new teams on board. When you have a new person in your team on board, in fact. So what this automation can do is detect if a ticket is being assigned to an agent that has just joined your team. You can have their names added, and you can have the automation instruct them saying, "Hey, it looks like this is a ticket about um, the self-help articles. Why don't you have a look at this solution article to help the customer out?" So that's an example of how you can use this. In other cases, if you'd like to notify different people in your team and you'd like a record of that on the ticket, you can have private notes added in that case. So similar to adding a note works when the people are on your Freshdesk, but sometimes you may need help from people who are in your company, but not a part of your Freshdesk account. And other times, if you're in e-commerce, you may need help from someone who doesn't even work at your company. They might be a different vendor, right? In those cases, what you can do is have the automations get in touch with them. So, as an example, if you belong to the e-commerce company Acme and you're working on a ticket and you realize that you need the help of your vendor and you need their inputs, all an agent would have to do is reply to the customer saying, "Hey, give us a day or two, we'll get back to you," and mark the status as dependent on the vendor. Now, as soon as the agent does that, automations would take care of firing an update, sending an email to the vendors saying, "Hey, can you please have a look at this ticket? Here's the content, here's the public ticket URL. It'd be great if you can respond to this within a day." And that can change, in fact, depending on the priority of the ticket. That little plus that you see in that email content, these are placeholders that you can add that reflect the property of the ticket that it's forwarding. Brilliant. So we've just started so far. The last two examples that I've spoken to you about, they touch base on how you can collaborate if the help that you need from different teams, it's relatively simple. Next, we're going to talk about the advanced ticketing modules that talk about that'll help you collaborate um, for in cases where you need to follow a different process altogether. Now, before I get into details of that, some of the features that I spoke to you about so far, if you do not see it in your Freshdesk account, and if you'd like for your CSM, your customer success manager, to get in touch with you, I'm going to share a poll. Just vote yes if you'd like for your customer success manager, to get in touch with you. So most of the features that I've spoken about, you will find it in your Freshdesk account. One or two, we can help you out. We'll help you figure out next steps. Brilliant. While that poll is up, let's talk about the advanced ticketing module. So I'm not going to dive too deep. The reason we're talking about this today is that we've introduced a whole module of set of automations that run specifically for these features, right? And for those of you who are not familiar, I'll just spend a few minutes touching base upon these different features. Now, parent-child ticketing works when you have a ticket and you need the help of different teams in the company to get the task done, and all those tasks are independent of each other. Right. So you have a parent ticket, which is typically a customer issue, and they would have given you task A, B, and C. And for those reasons, you create child tickets for the different teams in the company. The next is link tickets. Now, this works specifically in cases where you get a lot of emails from your customers. As an example, if your website is down, if the checkout page isn't working, if you're in e-commerce, or if you're a product company and if your product goes down for a couple of minutes, you're likely to have a flood of emails from your customers, right? Now, what Link Ticket does is you can link all the similar tickets together and have broadcast updates sent to agents. So they're updated on the progress of the issue. And they can easily copy the broadcast and have it sent to the customer. And this personally, for me, it's been wonderful because before Link Tickets, about 3.5 years back when there was an issue with Freshdesk, there were a lot of you folks who were writing in, and I was working really hard to reply to all emails, right? And at one point, I'd missed the update on our group chat that the issue had been fixed. And I was still replying to you folks saying that the issue is being investigated. Now that kind of issue no longer happens with us, because Link Tickets takes care of sending updates to agents immediately. Right? The last one is shared ownership. Now, shared ownership works when you're dependent on someone else in your company to help you out with the customer issue, and you're not able to proceed with the issue until they get back to you, right? Now, if you're wondering what the difference between parent-child ticketing and shared ownership is, I'll give you an analogy to help you understand that. So imagine you're a parent, you have 3 kids, and you need to get your house cleaned, right? You ask one kid to clean up the kitchen, one to take care of the living room, and one the bedroom. Now your house is clean if all these 3 different rooms are clean, but the kitchen being clean doesn't depend on the bedroom getting tidied up, right? So these are independent of each other. Now that's how parent-child ticketing works. Whereas shared ownership, on the other hand, if you assume you and your partner have taken the responsibility to do the laundry, you ask your partner to load up the washing machine, you say, hey, once it's done, I'll make sure I put it back in the cupboard. Now you don't have anything to do until your partner gets their job done. Now that is shared ownership, where you can't progress with a ticket, until and unless the person that you need help from shares their inputs with you. So this is a very brief introduction to the advanced ticketing module. Later I'll be sharing a poll with you if you'd like to dive deeper. I'll have Chara talk about how automations work here.
All right. So, like Durga explained, not all ticketing workflows are simple. And while you're able to automate most of the simple ones, you'll always get those cases where, you'll have to figure out a bunch of tasks before you can solve a support ticket that a customer is writing in about. And it's very important that, we take away the mundane out of these processes as well, right? So with the parent-child workflows, like we explained, sometimes a customer might write into you with an issue. And before you're able to resolve that issue, you probably have to depend on 2 internal teams of yours who will have to complete 2 tasks, which help you fix that issue, right? So in these cases, you're probably creating a couple of child tickets connected to the original ticket that the customer wrote into you about. And, the support agent who's working on the customer's ticket is always the single point of contact, and a customer relies on them to get the latest and the greatest. So with the parent-child ticketing automation, what you get to do is ensure that any updates made, any of these updates that are made to your tasks, essentially your child tickets, are easily synced right back to your parent ticket so that your support team and your support agent always has the latest information. Your development team might add a note on your child ticket saying, hey, the bug is fixed. Your finance team might add another note on their ticket saying, hey, we've initiated the refund. And all of these notes can seamlessly flow back to the parent ticket with these automations to make sure that your support agent is easily able to resolve the ticket. You can set up a lot of other such workflows. This is just one of those straightforward ones where we saw agents spending a lot of time, checking for updates and wanted to quickly automate. Now, apart from tickets where tasks have to be completed before they can be before the ticket can be resolved, there are always those doozies where you get your website down for a while, or there's a data center issue, or some there's just an ordering issue on your shopping cart, and you get a lot of customers writing into you about the same things, right? um, so tickets start piling up, and you need someone to fix something before you can respond back to all of those customers. So for instances like these, we've introduced the link ticketing workflow where your support team gets to create a tracker and assign a tracker ticket to the person responsible for solving the problem that's going to fix all the tickets that are linked to that problem, right? So in cases like these, we've seen that teams typically change the priority of the tracker tickets based on the number of link tickets that they receive, right? So the noisier the problem is, the higher the priority is that they get it fixed faster. So for instances like these, instead of having the teams constantly check for the number of tickets that are being created about a particular problem, you can now set up an automation rule which checks for the number of link tickets being created about a particular tracker. And whenever it crosses a particular threshold, automatically change the priority of the tracker, or add a watcher to that tracker ticket, or just notify a bunch of people in your team who'll be able to expedite the process. You can get creative with this, and at the end of the day, ensure that all your crisis scenarios, which are already being handled brilliantly by your support teams, now get a little bit easier and just a lot less mundane. So we also have your shared ownership scenarios where you need not just your support team to handle the ticket, but you'll also need some handholding and a secondary owner to be able to help them out. Now, in a lot of cases, we saw that support teams have handled enough tickets that they already know based on the subject, the description, a lot of other criteria, who the secondary owner should be right off the bat, right? So they don't even need to open the ticket, read through to figure out that, hey, another IT issue, I already know who to loop in, or hey, it's another password reset issue. And it's my to get involved, right? So these are support and then add the shadow. Now set up an automation rule which scans through different properties of the ticket and automatically sets up the secondary owner or the secondary group on the ticket to make sure that you take away even that mundane tasks from them. All right. So it's not always true that the more complex your workflows, uh, the more complex your automation rules have to be. So you could always just go on and set up simple automation rules to handle them all. So to quickly summarize, uh, we just ran through automation rules that run on parent-child ticketing workflows, uh, linked ticket workflows where you're looking at crisis situations where multiple people are writing in about the same problems, and shared ownership scenarios where there are multiple owners for a single ticket, and you're able to automate that as well. All right. So great. We're going to quickly move on to take a look at cheat sheet, which is going to help you set up automation rules easily and pretty much act as a ready referrer whenever you need help with your automations module. And I'll pass it back on to Durga to walk you through that.
Great. So this cheat sheet, it's more to help you, you know, at Freshworks, to give you our own story, sometimes when we roll out new features that's going to be hugely helpful for a team, it can take a couple of weeks for us to get that implemented into the team, right? As much as we try, and we're trying to get better at that. And make sure that we're adopting new features and configuring our Freshdesk account to make sure it's working the best way it can for us. This is just a handy cheat sheet to help you, as a checklist for yourself that you can cross-reference every once in a while, right? So especially taking the new automations into consideration, I've jotted down a couple for you. So the first for you is to review the rules that you've already set up. I spoke about the and/or combinations earlier in the webinar. Like we've had some customers who've been able to reduce their number of rules by using a combination of and/or, and used one single rule to automate a workflow for which they'd earlier set up two or three. Right. So I'd recommend reviewing all your rules and trying to see if you can do that if you set up more than one rule to perform just one action, because in the long run, it's just going to be easier for you to maintain if you have less number of rules set up. And sometimes you may have set up a rule hoping that it achieves something. Now with the audit logs that says who has set up the rule and the number of tickets it's impacted, you know whether it's working or not, right? And since we're on the topic of whether checking whether something is working, something worth considering is considering whether you need to change whether you have the rules on ticket creation execute based on first matching rule or based on all matching rules. This is something that Chara had spoken about earlier. Now, this feature is you're likely to have it set up once and not change it for at least a year or two. And if you do change it, you need to make sure you review every single ticket rules that run on ticket creation, because it can affect the way these rules file. Right? The last one, have you ensured that you've set up a periodic meeting to review all your automations? Because it might be because we're introducing new features that you may have used and that you'd like to add to your automations. Your team's likely to be evolving, you're likely to be working on adopting new processes. So ensure that you just have a periodic meeting to review automations and making sure that you're automating all your repetitive tasks. Now, under all repetitive tasks, there are a couple that fall under it. So here are questions you can ask to make that easy, to create a list of tasks that you can automate. Tickets reaching the right people. Here's where you consider automatic ticket assignment. What are the to-do lists that your team creates? And this is where you consider the time triggers. What tasks do the team sometimes forget? What tickets sometimes slip through the cracks? In these cases, you can have rules that run on ticket updates. Can we collaborate better with different teams? If the answer is a yes, do consider using custom statuses and have your automations work based on them. The last two features, this is something that I think would definitely benefit all of you. And one of them is the thank you detector. It's simple to set up. It's available for, you'll all find it in your automations. And the benefit is even if you choose to not keep the ticket as closed, you can have a tag added, and you can be entirely confident that your metrics are always reflecting the accurate resolution time, right? The next is setting up custom statuses to understand ticket lifecycle, because from support is not a one team job, right? I'm sure you, in your company, in your team, you do have dependencies on other teams. You might have dependencies on a different workflow altogether. So custom statuses are a great way for you to figure out what's exactly going wrong and to make sure you create workflows so your customers get answers as fast as possible. So just give me 1 second. I'm going to share a poll on whether you'd like a demo of the advanced ticketing features. So you'll find a poll on your Zoom. We'll have your customer success manager get in touch with you to give you a demo, whether you'd like to have it enabled. if you don't have it enabled already. Brilliant. Now, since we were talking about modifying, adding rules or changing them, here's a quick tip to help you troubleshoot. On a ticket on the top right, you'll find a button that says Show Activities. Now, if you click on that, Freshdesk will give you a list of every single activity that's happened on a ticket. It'll tell you, hey, a customer wrote to me, an agent has replied, and an automation is fired on it. And if you hover over the automation rule, it would take you to the exact automation that worked on that particular ticket. Um, so you can, if you can use this as soon as you set up a rule to test if things are working as expected. If you have doubts on whether the automation rules are working or not, you can always go and click on show activities, and it'll give you a good idea of how to take things forward. Cool. That brings us towards the end of the webinar. I'm going to share a couple of examples, just a few rules that the support team here at Freshworks have set up. So this is the rule summary of an automation rule that we've set up. So sometimes when you folks write to us and we reply saying, hey, here's the answer, hope this helps, can you let me know if it works? And I know customer support is we understand it's busy, and sometimes you may miss out on the email. You might find that it's you found the answer helpful, but you may have forgotten to get back to us. So what we do is after 3 days, we automation send you folks an automatic email saying, hey, I hope you got our answer. Do you still need help? Right? And after a couple of days, we send another email before which we close the ticket. And this automation rule specifically helps us a lot because we get thousands of tickets from you folks every day. And this helps making sure that anything that's pending and inactive, it's closed. So we have always a clear active list of tickets that we're working on. Cool. The next one, this is my favorite. This is something, tracking survey responses is something a lot of our customers have set up as well. I spoke about this earlier. When you send a customer satisfaction rating, it could be sent automatically, or someone in your team may have chosen to add it to their response. Depending on how your customers have rated the survey, you can have a different kind of email sent to them. You can have different set of actions triggered. So if someone's sent you an unhappy rating, you can have the ticket opened up, have it assigned to the supervisor in the team so they can follow up with the customer. The last one, this is specific. This is a rule that it's an interesting rule that we've seen some of our customers set up, especially customer support teams that typically don't have a large number of interactions with their customers. So the reason this is set up is because if a ticket has more than 8 back and forth conversation, it is likely that something is wrong. It could be that there's a new person on your team who's trying to help the customer and they've not quite understood the issue, because of which there's a lot of back and forth conversations. And when this happens, we immediately flag the ticket and notify the supervisor, the team leader, so they can just jump in and check if everything is okay. So even before your customer gets frustrated, you can proactively prevent that from happening.
All right. And so everything that you looked at, so long in terms of the rules that have been set up at Freshworks, these screenshots are actually screenshots of how the automation rules actually look. So what we did was, when we built our automations in Freshdesk, we ensure that we got it as close to your business rules in your documents as possible, right? So whenever you think about setting up an automation rule for your support help desk, I'm sure that you probably have a workflow that you walk yourself through, or you write it down on a document. And we wanted your automations experience to be as close to that as possible, right? So when you set up an automation rule in Freshdesk and then have to read through it to see if you set it up right, or modify it at any point in time, you can pretty much read through it in text rather than having to go through every single condition you've configured. Since we auto-generate a summary in the language that your account is in, and you can just read through it and edit any part of your automation rule. Great. So um, all of these are rules were screenshots of rules that have actually been set up, and that's what our own support team uses, to get provide you the experience that you have when you speak to support.
Brilliant. So I'll be sharing. By the way, I forgot to introduce Shweta. She's been helping you out with your questions. She's been with our support team for a couple of years. Thanks a lot, Shweta. She's sharing a feedback link with you. It'll be great if you can just share your feedback on whether you like the webinar, if you'd like to see something else in automation soon. This brings us to the end of the webinar. We'll stay for the next 10 to 15 minutes to answer any questions we've missed out on your Q&A. Thank you so much, folks, for taking the time to attend this webinar. If you have any questions, you can write to support@freshdesk.com. You also have my email address if you have any questions specific to the webinar.
So it was really great, being able to walk you through our automations. Thanks a lot for joining, and hopefully see you soon in another webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Bye. Have a good evening.